The first thing I remember is the silence before the miracle. A silence so thick it felt like time itself was holding its breath. It was 1969, a year when the world seemed to be spinning at the speed of revolution, when music was more than sound, it was salvation. And in that silence, a boy sat waiting. He had been broken by a cruel accident, his mind scarred, his days painted with struggle. But there was one thing that kept the light burning inside him: Elvis Presley. To him, Elvis was not just the king of rock and roll, he was hope itself, a voice that cut through the pain and reached places no medicine could ever touch. Before we dive deeper into this untold story of Elvis Presley, I want to invite you to be part of this journey with me. If this story stirs something inside you, if it makes you feel closer to the king, or to the fragile beauty of human kindness, please take a moment to subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. Your voice matters, and together we can keep the flame of Elvis's legacy alive for generations to come. The story begins in a quiet town where nothing extraordinary seemed likely to happen. I was tutoring a boy whose life had been altered forever by the cruel twist of fate that comes with a car accident. He was gentle, full of untamed energy, yet forever marked by the brain damage he had endured. His words often came out jumbled, his focus slipping like sand through fingers, but his heart burned with a single, unshakable obsession: Elvis Presley. Every lesson with him became less about math or reading, and more about Elvis. He wanted to know where Elvis lived, what Elvis wore, what Elvis sang before he became famous, and if Elvis ever cried when the world wasn't watching. To him, Elvis wasn't distant. He was family. The boy didn't just admire Elvis, he needed him. Elvis represented a promise that even brokenness could be transformed into beauty. It was in the middle of one of those long afternoons, when the boy's eyes lit up with the mention of a song, "Can't Help Falling in Love," that an idea sparked in me. I leaned closer and said softly, "You know, you could write to Elvis. You could tell him how much you love his music." His eyes widened as though I had offered him a key to the universe. That was the beginning of something none of us could have imagined. As fate would have it, Elvis was coming to a nearby hotel, taking a short break between concerts. For days, the hotel buzzed with rumors and whispers. Fans lined the sidewalks just to glimpse his shadow in a window. I could feel the boy's anticipation bubbling over, and I knew I had to do something. So I sat down with a pen and wrote a letter, not for myself, but for him. A letter that asked the impossible: could Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, spare a moment to meet a boy who carried his songs like lifelines? I mailed the letter with little hope. After all, Elvis Presley was larger than life. He wasn't just a man, he was a myth, a legend cloaked in rhinestones and velvet. But then the reply came. It was simple, almost understated, yet it carried the weight of a miracle. The answer was yes. Elvis would meet us. The next day remains etched in my memory with the clarity of lightning in a dark sky. We walked into that hotel, the boy clutching my hand with a mix of fear and excitement. His eyes darted to every corner, searching for the silhouette he had memorized from magazine covers and TV specials. And then, there he was. Elvis Presley didn't walk into the room. He arrived. Not with fanfare or flashing cameras, but with a presence that made the air tremble. Dressed simply yet effortlessly elegant, his smile radiated warmth that dissolved every ounce of nervousness. But what struck me most was his eyes. They weren't the eyes of a superstar gazing down at fans, they were the eyes of a man who cared. That he bent down to meet the boy at eye level. His voice was gentle, softer than any microphone had ever captured. "Hey there, buddy," he said, and just like that, the boy's entire world shifted. Elvis listened, really listened, as the boy tried to express how much his music meant. There was no impatience, no trace of ego. Only kindness. And then came the moment that froze time. Elvis reached into his pocket, pulled out a photo, and signed it with deliberate care. "This is for you," he said, placing it into the boy's trembling hands. But it wasn't just ink on paper. It was love made tangible, proof that miracles do exist. We stood there, captured forever in a single photograph: Elvis Presley, the boy, and me. That photo still rests in my possession, not as memorabilia, but as a sacred reminder of who Elvis truly was. The world often remembers Elvis as the king of rock and roll, the man who shook the stage with swiveling hips and thunderous songs. But the untold story of Elvis Presley lies in moments like this, moments where his crown wasn't made of jewels, but of compassion. Behind the glitter, he was a man who never forgot the power of kindness. When I look back, I realize this wasn't just about a boy meeting his hero. It was about Elvis showing us that greatness isn't measured by records sold or arenas filled, but by the ability to touch a single heart. He carried his fame not as a weapon, but as a gift, and he used it to uplift those who needed it most. The boy never stopped talking about that day. For years afterward, whenever his mind grew foggy or his words stumbled, he would clutch that photo and find clarity. "Elvis cares," he would say, and that was enough to keep him going. As the years passed and Elvis's story unfolded in ways the world now knows, the triumphs, the struggles, the weight of being an icon, I held on to that memory as my own untold story. Because the man I met in that hotel was not just a superstar, but a human being who gave a fragile boy the strength to keep believing in joy. Elvis Presley's legacy isn't just built on the stages of Las Vegas, or the screaming crowds in sold-out arenas. It's built in whispers, in gentle moments, in the unrecorded kindnesses that never made headlines. That is the real untold story of the king of rock and roll, and as I share this with you now, I ask you to pause and imagine, what if every legend carried such kindness in their heart? What if greatness was always paired with gentleness? That is the Elvis I knew. That is the Elvis who still lives, not just in records, but in souls. The hotel encounter was just one frame in the larger reel of Elvis Presley's life, but it revealed something rare, something cameras rarely caught. To understand it fully, you must picture the world in 1969. America was restless. Men had just walked on the moon. The Vietnam War raged in the background of every television set. Music was both protest and prayer, and in that chaotic noise stood one voice that seemed timeless, Elvis Presley. He was 34 that year, already crowned the king of rock and roll, already a legend whose name echoed through jukeboxes, radios, and living rooms across the country. But Elvis was also at a crossroads. The Hollywood film contracts that had once promised glory now felt like cages. He longed for the stage, for the fire of live music, for the chance to prove that he was not a relic of the 50s but a force still capable of shaking the earth. It was in Las Vegas, later that same year, that Elvis reclaimed his throne. Picture it, the International Hotel, lights spilling out into the desert night, the air electric with anticipation. Behind the curtain, Elvis adjusted his white jumpsuit, the one that would become iconic. He closed his eyes, said a prayer, and when the curtain rose, he exploded back into the world with a voice that hadn't aged a day. The crowd roared. Women wept. Men clapped until their hands ached. And yet, even in that thunderstorm of adoration, Elvis's mind carried memories of quiet encounters, the sick children he visited in hospitals, the fans he wrote letters to, the boy he had once knelt beside in a hotel room. Because here lies the untold story, Elvis Presley was not only a performer. He was a giver. His life was filled with small, secret acts of generosity that the tabloids never printed. He paid strangers hospital bills. He bought cars for fans who could never afford them. He slipped money to families in need, insisting his name never be mentioned. He lived with a heart wide open, even when fame demanded armor, but kindness is heavy to carry when the world insists you must always shine. Behind the dazzling concerts and the screaming fans, Elvis wrestled with loneliness. He bore the crushing weight of being more than human, of being Elvis Presley every waking moment. He couldn't go to a movie theater without chaos. He couldn't walk down a street without sparking hysteria. Even love was complicated when the whole world felt entitled to a piece of you, and yet, when he stood on stage, all that weight disappeared. The lights blinded him from seeing the endless rows of fans, but he could feel them. He could feel the energy pulse through the floor, up his legs, into his chest, and out of his mouth like thunder. In those moments, he was freed. I often think about the boy I tutored when I see old footage of those concerts. I imagine him in the crowd, his eyes wide, his heart beating in time with the music. I imagine him holding up that autographed photo like a talisman, proof that the king of rock and roll had once seen him, spoken to him, and made him feel like he mattered. That boy's joy was not unique. Elvis had a way of making every fan feel chosen, as if his songs were sung only for them. Perhaps that is why his legacy still endures, not just in vinyl records or digital playlists, but in the hearts of those who once believed their lives were touched by something greater than themselves. When people ask me about Elvis Presley, I don't just recall the superstar. I recall the man who bent down to meet a damaged boy eye to eye. That memory has grown heavier with time, because now Elvis is gone, and legends tend to harden into myths. But I was there. I saw the kindness. I saw the gentleness. And I know the truth. Elvis Presley's crown was forged not from rhinestones, but from humanity. The untold story of Elvis Presley is not only about music or fame. It is about resilience, generosity, and the quiet power of love. It is about the king of rock and roll who gave more than he ever received, who sang not just to entertain, but to heal. As the years rolled on and I aged, that photograph became my compass. Sometimes I would hold it and remember the boy's laughter, the way his face glowed in the presence of his hero. Other times, I would stare at Elvis's eyes in the picture and feel a pang of sorrow, knowing how heavy his life became in the years that followed. But always, I felt gratitude. Gratitude for having witnessed the real Elvis, not the headlines, not the legend, but the man. And now, I share it with you, because memories are fragile things. They fade if not carried forward, and the truth of Elvis Presley deserves to be remembered not just as spectacle, but as soul. So if you have felt his music stir your spirit, if you've ever listened to Suspicious Minds, or Love Me Tender, and felt your chest ache with something unexplainable, know that you are part of this story too. You are part of the living thread that keeps Elvis Presley alive. Let us not forget that legends are human. That even kings can be kind. That sometimes the greatest gift a superstar can give is not a performance, but a moment of connection. That was the Elvis I knew. That was the untold story. And so, as this story reaches its final note, I leave you with the same invitation Elvis gave to the world: to open your heart, to live with generosity, to sing even when the night feels dark. Because Elvis Presley was more than a man. He was proof that kindness can echo louder than fame. If this story has touched you, if it has brought you closer to the king of rock and roll and the humanity behind his crown, I ask you once more to subscribe, like, share, and comment. Let your voice join the chorus of those who refuse to let the truth be forgotten, because the king still lives, in every story, in every song, and in every act of love.